We are in section 2, the value streams and processes dimension of the release management practice. For the exam, the syllabus includes understanding and applying the processes of the practice. So you will have questions related to both understanding and as well as the application of the processes. In particular, we'll be looking at the inputs and outputs and activities of each of the processes, and also the application of practice integration into the organization's value streams. Now, out of the 20 marks in the exam, 5 marks are reserved for this section. And the previous section about key concepts of the release management practice will have 5 questions. So together, the section 1 and section 2, meaning the key concepts and the value streams and processes together make up 10 of the 20 questions in the exam. There are 2 processes in this practice. The first one is the release model development and improvement. And the second one is the release planning and coordination for specific releases. Therefore, the release model development and improvement is focused on the continual improvement of the release management practice, release approaches, and models. And the second process, the release planning and coordination, is focused on managing the life cycle of individual releases. We begin with the first process, the release model development and improvement. So this process is about the continual improvement of the release management practice. It focuses on that. And also the improvement of the release approaches and models, which are key for this practice. Now, even though the focus indicates improvement, but the model development, the approach development also happens in the same process. So this process can be developed, can be performed regularly, but it can also be triggered by certain events, such as major issues or some requests from certain key stakeholders. And when there are regular reviews for this release model improvement, then it can occur every 2 to 3 months or even more frequently, depending on how effective the existing approaches, models, and procedures are. Here we have the table for the inputs, activities, and outputs of this process. As always, with most of the processes in ITIL, and in this practice particularly, we have quite a lot of inputs as compared to the activities and key outputs. And usually, if you use some logical thinking, we should be able to ourselves identify some of those inputs and outputs. But then sometimes we may have to remember so that we can recollect them during the exam. So if you look at the various inputs here, we have the current release management approaches and models. We need that because if those have to be improved, then those become key inputs. Then existing release records, existing release review reports, those can also be key inputs for model improvement. And policies and regulatory requirements are needed not only for improvement, but for development for the first time. Similarly, the product architecture, the service catalog, the service level agreements, incident records and reports, IT asset information, agreements and contracts with suppliers and partners, relevant policies and plans, for example, information security policy, continuity policies and plans, capacity policies and plans. These become inputs for development as well as improvement. Now, 2 of these inputs here at the top here, the release records and release review reports, these are actually outputs of the next process that we will see after some time. The key outputs, and because this is a release model development and improvement process, therefore the key outputs would be the updated release management approaches and models. Now, one might wonder, why do not I see the first time release management approach and model? Because an organization may always have some approach to release management, even though it may not be formalized. Therefore, the aim of this process will be to improve on some rough or basic approach of release management and therefore update the existing approach and models. And then there may be some improvement initiatives also as a result of this improvement process, certain change requests for those improvements, and then certain updated knowledge management articles regarding procedures, etc., and some lessons learned as a result of assessment of the current approaches and models, which can become key inputs for ongoing improvements. Now, in the practice guide, you will see two more outputs. I have mentioned this as a footnote at the bottom. You will find release plan and release schedule also as outputs. It is a sort of incorrect because release plans and release schedules will be for specific instances of releases rather than overall approach and models. However, this could indicate the release plan template and the release schedule template rather than the plan and schedule for individual releases. Next, we have the activities in the middle column. The first step is to perform product architecture and service relationship analysis. Then the next step is the release management approach review and development. Then third step, release model review and development. The difference between 2 and 3 is number 2 is about the approach, number 3 is about the model. And number 4, the step 4 is the release model communication. So what we are seeing here is that this process seems to assume that release approaches and models in some form already exist and need to be improved, because there is no separate process listed to create the release approach and model for the first time. So for example, if an existing product release model does not include some roles such as site reliability engineer, or procedures are missing such as early life support procedures are missing, these will be added into the improved model. Or maybe the model could suggest improved release plan structure or release communication structures. And with respect to improvement in the release approach itself, a separate deployment and release phases could be combined into a single phase if there are none or minimal user onboarding activities, as we learned in the previous section on the key concepts of this practice. This is a depiction of this process. It shows visually the 4 steps or the 4 activities in sequence in this process. The first is the product architecture and service relationship analysis. The second, release management approach review and development. The third one, release model review and development. And the last, release model communication. In the previous slide, we saw the outputs of the entire process, but here we see what kind of outputs are coming from each of these steps.